where this conscience came from, or why do people disobey their conscience. Okay, so I will not anymore include that there are really a lot of types of conscience, no? Like certain erroneous conscience, scrupulous conscience. So, but I'll just provide you with these materials for us to have a better understanding of what conscience is all about, no? And in terms of origin, according to Saint Augustine, conscience is God whispering. So it is, when we speak of conscience, it is the inner voice of God to tell us what is good to be done and what is evil to be avoided. Now, the authority is that it is of divine, okay, and uh, the cases where you disobey your conscience is also an instance of sin. You disobey God. While Newman, he considered conscience in terms of its origin as coming from God, and also at the same time understands conscience as detector of truth, and then the authority of conscience is none other than also of divine or coming from God, no? So in case of disobedience of conscience is that he believed that we fear displeasing God, while Butler, the origin of conscience for him is that it is God's intuition, and at the same time exerts itself without consultation. And then the authority is divine, and then it is infallible. So in case of disobedience of conscience, is deception of conscience is worse than resultant action. While Saint Thomas Aquinas understands the origin of conscience as God and human reason. And of course, like the other three authors, he also believed that the authority of conscience is divine, but we need to use our reason and experiences. So an instance of disobedience of conscience is that it is a result of poor reason. Now, going now let us proceed to what these psychologists, not just the theologians and the philosophers, understands the origin, authority, but also this psychologist, and one of them is Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud understands the origin of conscience as an internalization of external societal authority by super ego. So he explained this coming from his theory of the ego and superego principle. So marani siya og ang superego mao gini siya ang imong moral principle. So kung ang imong self i-follow lang niya most of the time ang iyang id, ang mag-remind ana ang superego, no? So mo nang ang origin sa conscience is that it is because of the superego that is within ourselves. That is the explanations of Sigmund Freud. So the authority is the society, no? This time it is the social norm that forms our conscience, no? It is the one that dictates the what is right and what is wrong according to Sigmund Freud. So in the case of disobedience of conscience is that guilt and neurosis can result if conscience disobeyed. Okay, now Jean Piaget understands the origin of conscience as it develops as we get older. So it is autonomous morality. So at the age of 11 that you will start to develop the understanding of what is right and what is wrong. So where does this conscience, it is actually that the formation of conscience is because of the presence of adult authority figure that you will also follow because you are afraid if you disobey them. And at the same time they understand that it is autonomous, so we are our own authority. By the time that we, as we we mature in our age and in our physical, mental, emotional, and almost all aspects of our life, that we will be able to have the authority to make our own judgment of what is right and what is wrong. Now, in the case of disobedience, the heteronomous is that fear of punishment from authority figure, and then the autonomous is that there is that feeling of guilt when the disobedience of, in the case of disobedience of uh, conscience. Now, from, he understands the origin of, for him, he understands the origin of conscience as comes from fear of displeasing authority. But at the same time, he also understands that our real self is aiming for self-actualization. So the origin again is authoritarian and external authority figure. That is the where this the authority of the conscience come from, and at the same time we are our own authority. Now, as to the case of disobedience of conscience, we have this fear of punishment from external authority, and at the same time we fail to reach self-actualization. Okay, so that's the origin, the authority and disobedience of conscience. So as you can see, we need to have the so-called formation of conscience. If you see the similarities of how they understand conscience, we need to form our conscience. So how? It is the education of the morality of human act. What is good and what is bad, we have to educate the individual or a person. So conscience is to be formed and informed. Okay, so what is the moral responsibility of one's conscience? Number one is that we have duty to obey our conscience in all circumstances. Okay, so next is that we have to act in conformity with certain conscience. So we need, as I've said, those conscience that are formed and informed. That is what we have to follow. That's part of our moral responsibility. And the last one is, do not follow a doubtful conscience. If you are not sure about what is right and what is wrong, then you do not have to act on it according to the dictates of your conscience. Okay, so that's the importance of this topic in our understanding of what is right and what is wrong. So that's all for this discussion. If you have questions or clarifications, feel free to message me. Thank you for listening.